We are Venom. You are insignificant.
Hello, Rivals fans, and welcome back to the Rivals Report, the show that gets you up to speed on Rivals esports news in a nice, bite-sized package. My name is Diatonic, and this is the Rivals Report number 13 for the week of August 25th, 2025. On this week's report, we've got yet another dose of Rostermania news, from Tier 1 teams down to the grassroots scene. The second split of Ignite qualifiers is done, and we've got your first look at the newest teams you'll be seeing in Stage 2. We're also checking back in on the Vanguardian League as the last week of preliminary play is in the books. And head south with us as we take a look at the first 2 weeks of Ascension League Latin American action. Well, it's been a busy Rostermania season thus far, as we saw in last week's Rivals Report, but we're back this week to bring you a few more updates for some teams and players as we march closer and closer towards the start of Ignite Stage 2. Kicking things off with some more heavy hitter moves, Sentinels is saying goodbye to 4 members of the team. Players Amazing, Super Gomez, and Korova are all parting ways, as well as Analyst and Exile. Sentinels were the champions of Ignite Stage 1 here in NA, so it can be a bit surprising to see a good chunk of their core departing. They've been playing together since they signed with Nightmare some months back, and response from the fans across social media has been shock and awe, to say the least. It's not clear exactly what's influenced their decisions, but I have to doubt that any of them will be free agents for any significant period of time. And Sentinels are already looking to fill the gaps in their roster as well. They've announced that they're bringing in a new coach, former Overwatch pro McGravy. McGravy is no stranger to success on esports' biggest stages, having won the 2023 Overwatch League playoffs alongside the Florida Mayhem. On the player front, Sentinels have also announced they're acquiring Avery, a duelist formerly of the team Techie XD. Avery's tangled with the Sentinels before when they did battle in the upper bracket of the Stage 1 playoffs, so they're no stranger to this new DPS. But just like last week, Sentinels aren't the only Ignite caliber team saying goodbye to a large portion of their core. Gen G also announced the departures of Dotori, FunFun, Kaidia, and Exi as well. They were sent home from the play-in stage of mid-season finals in heartbreaking fashion, dropping all 4 maps they played against Nova Esports and Envy, so it's not too surprising to see that the org is looking for a big shakeup. I don't think this spells the end of Gen G Marvel rivals, however, as they still have Brownie, Choppa, and Snake on their team. They too will be back in action in Stage 2 of Ignite, so be on the lookout for any new signings from them. The Fire Strays also have some additional moves to announce this week. They fell just short of an invite in the first split of EMEA Stage 2 qualifiers, and announced over on X that the EMEA roster were going their separate ways. They're reporting the split as mostly amicable, however, and that the players have moved on to other rosters. But in the same message, they also announced their intentions to muster an NA squad for the upcoming Stage 2. Stay tuned as we've got our eyes peeled for that roster reveal as well. And rounding out the Ignite competitor news, Ego Death is getting a new coat of paint ahead of their return to Ignite Stage 2. While not exactly an org signing, Ego Death will be known as Odyssey going forward. Odyssey was initially an NA Overwatch Contenders team, but disbanded back in 2023. But now they're back, at least in name, and home to the former Ego Death team for now. You may have last seen them competing in Stage 1 just to win away from qualifying for LAN, but they've been lighting up the community tournament scene as well, with a couple of entries into the Cozyverse Cash Cups. In other full roster news, Extinction has announced that their complete Rivals roster is being released. According to their post on X, this decision was made, quote, due to offensive comments being brought to light. They apologized for the issue, but didn't immediately make it clear what was happening. After some fans raised questions on the original tweet, they followed up by saying that one of their members made some incredibly unfortunate remarks, but that a large core of their roster would receive recommendations from the org. So for now, Extinction falls dormant in the competitive Rivals space. Along the same lines, Lotus has also announced the unfortunate release of their Rivals roster for the similar reason of controversial comments made towards opposing players. It started last week when Lotus initially tweeted they had been made aware of the incident and were looking into it. They later followed up with a brief thread explaining that in light of these events, they were letting go of the roster. They're still in the MRC under the name Lotus, but the org itself has made it clear there is no affiliation now. We also have a new team entering the space from Saudi Arabia, as Quasar Esport announced their own Rivals roster last week on X. There's definitely an influx of Rivals talent coming into the space from Saudi Arabia, as they follow in the footsteps of fellow Saudi team Think Twice, who've been featured a number of times on the Rivals Report. But with esports having a particularly large install base in the Middle East, it's no surprise to see even more teams from the region throwing their hat in the ring. And speaking of new teams, Ultralight revealed their new Ultralight X roster, ironically over on X, this past Friday. Ultralight is no stranger to both in-game and community tournament competition, as we've seen them in the Rivals Ascension League, and they're currently competing in the Season 3 MRC. As of the time of recording, Ultralight X has already broken out into the double elimination stage of the MRC, so certainly a good start for the freshman team. And in returning team news, all the way over in OCE, Fury returns to the table with a new Rivals roster. This Australian org had their first foray into Rivals all the way back during the Rivals Invitational in February, where they placed third after being defeated by Kanga Esports. The original team split shortly after, and Fury initially didn't look to sign a new roster. A couple of their players, Billa and Nev, have some recent competitive experience, having placed second in the Pacific Region Season 2 MRC. Rostermania even reaches all the way back to the collegiate scene, with the US school year just kicking off and college esports programs across the country moving to form squads. York University has announced they're in the search for a Rivals team and have put out an all-call for managers and coaches. York did specify that you don't have to be a student in order to qualify for this position, so if you're a prospective coach looking for a team to take care of, this could be a great opportunity to get some collegiate Rivals experience. And with the Collegiate Rivals Series and other college esports orgs such as the NECC having already announced tournaments, there will be plenty of places for college teams to play. Speaking of collegiate rivals, and last but certainly not least in this batch of full roster news, the UK University Esports champion team formerly known as Groot FN is sporting a new set of colors amidst this busy competitive season. We've seen them in a few other places like the Grassroots Weekly and the Ascension League. But going forward, they'll be under the banner of Valorant and Rocket League org Fragging Friends. They're a close-knit crew with a hunger to find their own foothold in the competitive Rivals space, so working with an org is definitely a next step up for the fledgling roster. But of course, Rostermania doesn't just affect rosters and orgs. Individual free agents are also on the move amongst the chaos. Light and Yoki, both formerly of FlyQuest, have been posting that they're available and looking for teams for Stage 2. Cal from Team Envy has also announced that he's been granted permission by the org to explore his options, so he's now become a limited free agent as well. Of course, some of the players from teams we talked about on this and the previous Rivals report are in search of teams as well, and only time will tell who will pick them up. But with so much talent floating out there, it's highly likely we'll continue seeing big talent shakeups and big new roster reveals in the coming months. Be sure to subscribe to keep up with all the latest roster news, as the Rivals report will keep you posted on any further announcements. Well, this weekend was jam-packed with competitive Rivals action, as the MRC moved into the double elimination phase and community tournaments were firing on all cylinders yet again. But on top of all that, the second split of Ignite qualifiers was held. And with even fewer invites on the table for competing teams, the competition was that much more fierce. Starting off on the Americas side once again, with only 2 invites on the table in this qualifier, it all came down to Project Bluelock versus Ilani Wind and the Dilducks versus Solaris. Bluelock and Ilani Wind started off all Ilani, though they fought through a highly contested Hall of Djalia and Midtown to pick up their first 2 wins. Bluelock would lock in on Krakoa and pick up a 2-1 victory, extending the series by a map, but would ultimately meet their end on Central Park. Ilani Wind cleared the map and managed to prevent Bluelock from scoring, meaning they were back in the Ignite circuit once again as the first of 2 invites from NA. Meanwhile, in Dilducks vs Solaris, things were dire for Solaris off the bat. Dilducks eked out 2 very close wins on Yggdrasil Path and Araco after some Solaris players disconnected, slipping into an incredibly early match point against the Ignite Stage 1 competitors. With their backs against the wall, Solaris put the pedal to the metal for the rest of this series, clinching a reverse sweep against the Ducks after winning on Krakoa, Central Park, and Hall of Djalia. They'd actually go on to the finals to defeat Ilani Wind in another reverse sweep, but they had earned their invite through their victory over the Ducks. 2 invites were also up for grabs in EMEA, with the deciding rounds being OG Seed versus Ninja Creamy and Team 1 versus Revived. The battles of veterans versus newcomers started with OG and Ninja, with OG clocking a perfect 3-0 win against the unsigned team. Ninja fought back on maps 1 and 3, scoring a point on both Burnin' T'Challa and Araco, but it wasn't enough to stop the former Stage 1 Ignite competitor from capturing their Stage 2 invitation here. Team 1 delivered a beatdown to Revived in the other deciding matchup, picking up a commanding 3-0 victory over the newcomer team. It was going to be an incredibly tough match for Revive no matter how you sliced it, but they did manage to hold Team 1 to a single point on the final 2 maps of Symbiotic Surface and Midtown. But without being able to score any of their own, it was a quick semifinal matchup, and the team that conquered in China had landed themselves back on the Ignite stage once again. Team 1 would ultimately go on to defeat OG in the finals 3-0, completing a no maps dropped run through the top 8 bracket. That means out of this second split of Ignite qualifiers, all 4 teams from NA and EMEA are returning from Stage 1. If you're interested in a deeper dive into some of these qualifier matches, be sure to check out Ignite caster and friend of the channel Tetcher, who's uploaded the VODs to his channel with his own casting. And if you need even more of a Rivals Esports news fix, he's got you covered with his Rivals Esports recap series as well. Well, this weekend played host to the final preliminary matches for Season 3 of the Vanguardian League. It's been a fierce competition so far, with several Ignite teams going head-to-head, while the up-and-comer teams bring their all to send a message to those top teams. We're checking in on week number 3 now and helping you get ready for their upcoming playoff bracket. Kicking things off, we had a matchup between Intergalactic, the team formerly known as Shroud X, and LFO, the Season 2 MRC runners-up and formerly Arrival 7. We were on Central Park for this first matchup, and Intergalactic was out for blood. Intergalactic were firing on all cylinders here, and they closed the map out in convincing fashion. Doomed spelled doom for LFO here, playing an insane Star-Lord game in this matchup, but it was Flame's Loki that would snag the MVP, being a big game changer in this game. Next up, let's take a look at two teams that are new to the Rivals Report, Bealistic and Iliad Achilles. These two squads had a banger matchup on Symbiotic Surface, going to war as they traded blows back and forth, eventually resulting in extra rounds. Bealistic went ballistic in those extra rounds, managing to complete a massive overtime push with over half the map cleared in OT. Iliad would have a 27-second advantage as they switched sides, but Bealistic would swat them away from even unlocking the payload. It was a decisive win for the Bees and their very first here in the VGL. And finally from VGL this week, we had a heavy hitter Ignite matchup as FlyQuest took on Dark Zero. This match was bound to be a knockdown drag-out brawl, and it did not disappoint. It was a tug of war from the very beginning, but almost looked as though DZ might have been able to close it out on point 2. But they fell just short, and it all came down to an insane 99-99 overtime for the third and final point. By the very end of overtime, bodies and ults were flying in every direction, but through the smoke and chaos, it would be Dark Zero coming out on top just by the skin of their teeth. Next week marks the start of playoffs for VGL Season 3, with the top 8 teams entering into the final bracket for a shot at the more than $1,500 prize pool. But only time will tell which team will emerge the Season 3 champions. We'll have details on the VGL playoffs for you in an upcoming episode of the Rivals Report, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Well, amid a turbulent MRC season for Latin American teams, the Rivals Ascension League is back in action and ready to deliver a stage exclusively for LATAM. This is the Rivals Ascension League South American Invitational, where 10 LATAM teams have thrown their hat in the ring and look to show just how powerful their region really is. First though, we should discuss the elephant in the room, LATAM and latency issues. Players from both NA and South America have been reporting latency issues when competing against one another in the MRC for a couple of seasons now. Prevalent figures in the Rivals LATAM community have been all over X voicing their concerns and asking netties to create a separate LATAM branch for the MRC, Ignite, and more. This is why leagues like Rivals Ascension are so important. They give us a real opportunity to see what LATAM is made of in a time where they're being held back by latency. Now let's talk about the matches. First up, a match that I personally oversaw and an absolute banger series between INF's Esports and Zocorp Esports. INF's kicked things off strong in this best of 3 series, taking a commanding early lead on Central Park and leaving Zocorp in the dust. However, it wouldn't take long for Zocorp to catch up, eking out an incredibly close win on Map 2 and building up a wave of momentum that carried them to a Map 3 and a series victory here in a solid reverse sweep. Next up, potentially a pair of teams you aren't as familiar with, Shield BR versus BKS Esports. BKS got the ball rolling on Hall of Dojalia, stopping Shield from even unlocking the payload. Shield managed to claw their way back to a Map 2 win on Celestial Husk, having to play out all 3 capture points. But BKS sealed the deal as we moved to Yggdrasil Path for their final bout. Both teams managed to clear the map, but BKS had a big time bank advantage over Shield. They'd use that to their advantage and close things out in extra rounds. One more match for now, this time Team Nexus versus Las Cabras. Nexus opened this match with a close Hall of Dojalia, holding Cabras just before they completed the map. Cabras would come back with a haymaker on Map 2, stopping Nexus at 99% captured on the 3rd point. Midtown for Map 3, and it would also go the distance, with the map being pushed into extra rounds. Their time banks were almost dead even, and Nexus would manage to secure a point in the extra rounds, and that would be just enough to give them the win. Ascension will be taking a short hiatus while Ignite qualifiers and MRC action clears up, but the Rivals Report will be back to give you an inside look at those matches when they return. Well, that's all for this week's Rivals Report. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on the latest in Marvel Rivals Esports. And be sure to follow me on other platforms including Twitch, X, and TikTok. And if you're looking to break into Rivals Esports yourself, look no further than Engage. They're an organization that looks to empower esports players through event hosting and production. They're also the minds behind some Rivals community tournaments like the Chronovium Cup and the Rivals Grassroots Weekly. For all things Engage, keep it tuned to their website at engage.gg. I've been Diatonic, you've been amazing, and I'll see you in game.